Okay, now that everybody's here, thank you again for joining us today. You've logged on to the Regulatory Compliance Associates webinar, Expanding Your Pharmaceutical QMS for Combination Product Success. Now, if you missed one of our webinars or would simply like to refer to one, you can always find them on the RCA website, on demand webinars page listed under resources. And you'll also receive notifications for upcoming live and on demand webinars by signing up for the RCA newsletter or following us on LinkedIn. RCA, Regulatory Compliance Associates, a Nelson Labs company, provides comprehensive regulatory, quality, and compliance consulting services to the pharmaceutical, biologics, sterile compounding, and medical device industries. With a team of more than 500 global experts, RCA helps life science organizations navigate complex FDA and international regulations, develop and maintain robust quality systems, and remediate compliance challenges. From inspection readiness and regulatory submissions to product development and post-market support, RCA partners with clients across the product lifecycle to ensure safety, efficacy, and compliance. And now let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Jessica Schaefersman, one of RCA's leading device development SMEs, and I'll let her provide you some background about herself during the presentation. Before we begin, we do encourage your questions, so please submit them at any time in the question box below, and Jessica will try to get to and answer as many as she is able to in the last bit of time today. Now, to begin today's presentation, I turn our time over to Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can see me and you can see the screen okay. Yeah, so as Brandon said, today we're going to talk about expanding a pharmaceutical QMS for combination products. A little bit about me. I am a biomedical engineer by education. I have 25 years of experience doing not only medical device product development and design files, but also quality management system, creation, remediation, etc. I've been with RCA now for 11 years, consulting and helping companies not only expand their QMS, but also create development files and with compliance issues and things of that nature. I do have experience with all classes of devices and all manner of submissions. And I have done this exact thing that we're talking about today, which is expanding a pharmaceutical QMS to include combination products at least 3 separate times. So hopefully I have some wisdom that I can impart to you all today that'll help you out. Brief overview of the agenda. We're going to talk about the streamlined approach because it is by far and away the most common approach. There are 6 elements that we'll talk about that need to be incorporated into your quality management system to develop combination products as a pharmaceutical or biologic company. We'll break down design controls a little bit more. It's one of the 6 sections, but it is probably the most complicated section. We will touch briefly on software and cybersecurity because that is coming into combination product development more and more. And then we'll go over some implementation strategies that can potentially help you execute to this. So combination products, why are they such a big deal right now? It's all about convenience. And it's all about differentiating yourself on the market, right? The patients want something that's easy. Not only the patients, but the healthcare providers want easy delivery of drugs or biologics. They want to be able to not have to open 15 packages in order to deliver a drug to a patient, things like that. Also, home health and home use has been expanding rapidly. So when it comes to drugs that need to be delivered via an injection, prefilled syringes, auto-injectors, and even vial kits, these things have expanded the market considerably. Also, the regulatory clarity since the FDA has implemented the CFR 4.4, it's now pretty obvious what you need to do and how you need to do it in order to submit combination products and get them approved through the FDA. And now more and more with apps and connected devices, people want to help patients and users track their dose delivery, track their track their medications and things like that. So now there's even more reason that you would want to incorporate the drug into a device that can help them do those things. So more and more pharma and biologic companies that have classically solely been pharma or biologic companies are now wanting to be able to market and deliver their drugs in a ready-to-deliver format, which makes them combination products. So a little bit about the regulatory foundation. The FDA stood up the Office of Combination Products that will define, it defined not only what a combination product is, which is the combination of a drug and device, a biologic and device, or drug and biologic, or drug, device, and biologic. It is physically combined into a single thing, like a prefilled syringe or an auto-injector, where it's one deliverable. It might be co-packaged, such as a vial kit, where you deliver the vial with the drug or biologic in it, and then a syringe and a needle, or a filter needle and a syringe and things like that. That is also considered a combination product. However, cross-labeled products are also considered combination products, where if within your labeling or your IFU, you say, this must be delivered with syringe XYZ or with device ABC, that is now also considered a combination product. So the way that the FDA views these is that the primary mode of action, the constituent part that is the primary mode of action, is defines the type of submission you will be providing. So for all of the devices that we're talking about today, for the most part, they are all delivery of a drug or biologic. Therefore, the drug or biologic is the item that will be providing the therapy to the patient, which means it will be the primary mode of action, which means the device will be secondary to that. So what that means is it will be submitted to the agency responsible for the constituent part of the primary mode of action. All that means is if it's a drug, it'll go to CDER. If it's a biologic, it'll go to CBER. You'll be submitting it under a BLA or an NDA or an IND, but there will be a portion of it, a chunk of the submission that gets broken off and sent to CDRH so they can review the device portion. They break it up and they share the responsibility, and that is all defined by the Office of Combination Products. So your combination products have to satisfy both quality management system regulations. Cross-labeled products, if you are mandating that your drug get delivered with a specific device, then that specific device may never enter your facility. You may never have hands on it. So that can be totally managed under its own quality management system, and your drug managed under its own quality management system, and those two do not have to touch. But if it's co-packaged or if it's a single entity, you have to satisfy both the drug and device quality management system regulations. So the good news is CFR 4.4 has provided us the streamlined approach, which means you only have to add in these specific bits into your existing QMS, which is already 210, 211, or 600, 680 compliant, to be compliant to the whole device regulation, which is typically CFR 820 sections. So one thing I want to note here is that the FDA has recently, as earlier this year, harmonized the CFR to ISO 13485. which is the ISO standard for quality management systems for medical devices. This means that what used to be a little blurb paragraph of regulation in the CFR that described what you needed to comply with has now expanded into an entire section of an ISO standard. This is going into effect in February of next year, so there's no reason to talk about just the CFR anymore, because really everything is going to 13485, and they are referring to this as QMSR instead of just QSR. So when QMSR takes effect, not only will you have to be compliant to those little sections, but those little sections in CFR 820 now refer to bigger sections in ISO 13485. And I'll be referring to both of them throughout the presentation here. So the streamlined process. You only need to incorporate, this is all assuming you already have a 210-211 or a 600 through 680 compliant QMS, right? You already have your full drug biologic QMS stood up, established, and you're following it. Now you want to make a combination product with your drug or biologic, so you have to add these sections into your QMS. This includes management responsibility, the design controls, purchasing controls, corrective and preventive actions, which is often called CAPA, installation, and servicing. Now, like I said, in the CFR, these sections, most of them are just little blurbs that are pretty easy to develop an SOP to comply with. But now we have the QMSR challenge of the actual sections of ISO 13485 that we have to comply with as well. So we're going to break down the 6 key elements that I just talked about, and I'm going to talk briefly about each one and about what it means to incorporate this into your QMS. So let's start with management responsibility. This will be a new procedure or SOP. It's going to outline explicit executive management responsibilities for development of the QMS, maintenance of the QMS, maintaining that the company has a customer focus and utilizes customer requirements, that executive management is responsible for meeting regulatory requirements, establishing the quality policy, having a management review, and you have to have appointed a management representative who has the proper training and experience to report on the quality assurance and the quality management system up to executive leadership. This is typically one procedure that you add into your QMS that outlines the management responsibility and the inputs and outputs of a management review meeting that should happen at least annually. One SOP here for management responsibility. Purchasing controls. So when it comes to the medical device purchasing controls in their QMSR, it's more than just supply chain management. Most of you will probably already have supply chain management laid out in your 210-11 or 600 through 680 QMS, but this is about evaluating suppliers and qualifying them before you use them and while you're using them and continuously throughout use of suppliers. So it's performance-based. The whole goal is to ensure that your purchased products and components and things you buy from your suppliers conform to specifications that you have defined prior to buying them. You select your vendors based on the evaluation of their ability to meet your requirements. You have appropriate controls established as the basis for this evaluation. You have records that you generate. You maintain supplier files. They get reviewed regularly. You have them usually ranked as like a tier 1, tier 2, or critical, non-critical type of suppliers. And based on your supplier rankings, that determines how much you trust them. whether you have to do receiving inspection on everything that you purchase from them, or whether you can accept it based on their cert. And this is based on the type of quality management system that they have and how tightly they're controlled and what kind of history and experience they have. So it is specific to the medical device constituent parts, but you do have to implement purchasing controls, and part of purchasing controls is implementing receiving inspection. So you have to inspect to some degree everything you purchase from these suppliers. But the degree to which you do all that can be laid out in the procedure. So this can either be one new SOP or it could be two. You might want a special one for receiving inspection, but both are part of this section of the regulation. So CAPAs. The CAPA section in the QMSR, the section of ISO 1345, is harmonized with control of nonconformances. So it's all the same section when it comes to ISO 1345, whereas it was a separate call out in the CFR. But the CAPA process SOP that we write, it describes how you initiate a CAPA based on what inputs, right? So it can be any kind of nonconformance that could initiate a CAPA. Complaints, a failure of testing, maybe a release test fails or something like that. Other types of nonconformances, receiving inspection, supplier performance, these things could instigate CAPAs. Complaints from the field, complaints from customers, labeling snafus, all of these types of things could initiate CAPAs. But what a CAPA is capturing the input, investigating it all the way to a root cause. And that root cause then is what is getting corrected. You're not correcting the symptom, which is the nonconformance that occurs. You are correcting the root cause of the nonconformance, which could be procedural, it could be resource related, it could be distractions in the environment, it could be a number of things. But CAPA is different than just a nonconformance. And CAPAs cover the entire quality system. So as I say here, finished combination product manufacturers may need to establish a CAPA system that's shared between facilities. Or facility-specific CAPA systems might need to be linked if you have contract manufacturers and things of that nature. But once you implement a corrective action based on a CAPA, you then have to go back and verify its effectiveness. You have to record all of this. You have to generate records that you're following your CAPA process. So CAPAs is a big one, and it touches many portions of an existing QMS. So you have to be really cognizant of that when you're developing your procedures for this. I'm skipping design controls and going straight to installation and servicing because we're going to expand on design controls pretty heavily in a minute here. So installation and servicing. This is if your combination product has to be installed. If you need to go to a location to install it, or if you need to have the user install it before it can be used. This is a procedure that outlines how you will ensure it is installed properly, what records you will maintain for the installation, what acceptance criteria exists for installation, and who's okay to do it, who's not, how we'll know it's been done right. And kind of the same thing goes for servicing. If servicing is something that applies to your combination product, then you need to outline how that happens, what materials are needed, what tools are needed, what measurements they need to make, or confirmatory activities need to be done, what records you're going to keep regarding servicing that occurs, and then If this was associated with a complaint, it would need to be looped back into the complaints process and or the risk process and or the design file. So all of these, and if you have a fully functional QMS, you know this, every SOP kind of sort of interacts with all the other ones. So as you're implementing these new SOPs for the device portion of your combination product, you have to be really careful to recognize how it's touching all the other SOPs that you're implementing it, that you already have implemented and are trucking right along, working great. Because you could create a bit of a snafu. Okay, design controls. This is the biggie. This is the hard part for most pharmaceutical drug manufacturers because it is a very foreign way to document the design of a product. So we're going to go through it step by step. All of these sections, all of them apply to the device constituent part, and they're all part of that same one section in the CFR 820.30. So first, you have to have procedures that outline how you do these things for your device portion. And within those procedures, you have to outline what records you're creating to document that you did follow those procedures. This is this design file, design and development file. The FDA has typically called this a design history file in the past, but now that we're migrating to the 13485 terminologies, they call it a design and development file. It still includes all the same sections, but this is what will make up most of that device portion of your submission, these design controls that we talk about next. Planning is the first step. You have to plan in advance what activities you're going to do, who's going to be responsible for what are the interfaces between the teams, at what point will the device start coming together with the drug or pharmaceutical, manufacturing plans, development plans, who's going to document what. All of these things get outlined in the design and development planning before it starts. Design inputs are, the statement is you have to determine and document device design requirements appropriate to address the intended use, including user and patient needs. So the design inputs define what the device needs to do or be. It usually starts with user needs, high level from a user's perspective. The user wants the device to do this. Those get broken down into more specific engineering level requirements, but that is usually how you capture that your intended use and your user requirements have been translated into your design input requirements that are engineering level and testable. And we have design outputs. This defines what the device is. So this is after you've thought about what all the requirements are, you go design it, build it, find all the right components and suppliers, and then how you document what you've determined it will be. These are specifications for parts and materials. These are drawings. There are sometimes assembly instructions or manufacturing instructions. This allows us to define exactly what the device is that we have designed. Those are design outputs. And then design verification is the testing or other assessment documentation, evaluation, that the outputs that we have now documented meet the requirements. So every requirement should have some sort of verification evidence. These are functional, operational, physical, things like as simple as dimensions. You verify them, and that is design verification. I do say here, consider safety, security, specification, dimensions, volumes, but then you have things like performance, which is delivery plus or minus this many milliliters, or delivery within a certain amount of time, things like that. Those are performance. Function is the ability for it to do those things. not necessarily within a time frame, but just that it does it. But you also need to consider distribution, shipping studies, packaging design, and shelf life. So that is design verification. And then design validation is testing that demonstrates you've met the intended use and the user needs. Typically performed under actual or simulated use conditions according to the defined operating conditions on initial production units, lots or batches, or something you can justifiably call equivalent. So this is your final device. No more tweaks and adjustments. This is what the device is coming off the end of our fill line or pack line or whatever it is. This is typically human factors studies, where you're testing the usability in a simulated environment with actual users. Very special considerations that come into play for combination products are home use things. Anything that is intended for a patient to take home and use themselves, I guarantee you they're going to want you to do human factor studies for your design validation. And another thing to consider is if your device is going to be available over the counter. You have to define your user groups, who's going to buy this, and test that they can use it and read it and understand it and not hurt themselves with a usability study. So if you have software associated, if you're incorporating an app or a scanemabob that allows you to scan and track things or things like that, those also will require human factors testing, usability testing, validation testing. So just a note for human factors, there's a whole nother standard, not just 1345, but IEC 62366 that talks about what is necessary for a human factors file, and that it is all contained in the DHF as well. Design reviews is another portion of the design control regulation. This is that at certain points that you define in advance, you will take a step back and review the entire design, sort of top down, high level. Does everything line up? Does this all make sense? Have we defined everything we need to define? It usually involves a management representative, and it usually involves an independent reviewer, somebody who has not been involved in the development process, to look at it from an outside perspective and conduct this design review and approve the project to move on to whatever the next phase is. You have to have at least one design review within your design and development file by order of regulation. But we do recommend that you phase gate your development to several design reviews. It's just a more functional process. Design transfer. So once you have the design verified, typically as you're going into verification or as you've finished the first part of verification testing, you need to start your design transfer. This is a documented and outlined procedure where you transfer the design from R&D to manufacturing. So you're establishing all those design outputs that you took and you're making them manufacturing processes. You have a master validation plan for your manufacturing processes. Think about the fill line, the pack line, sealing machines, things like that. Setting all that up, determining all the right settings for those things, doing procedural or process risk assessments, things like that. This all happens in design transfer. Master batch records get established during design transfer based on the design outputs that you've documented. And then you have to save records of this process happening within your design and development file. It's called design transfer. And then design changes. So you have to have a process established for how you will handle changes in design. And trust me, they will happen. You might think that I'm designing a prefilled syringe, I'm picking a perfect supplier, it's going to be great forever, I'm never going to need to change any of this. You will be wrong, because suppliers change things all the time. And if you are not the one injection molding your own stoppers or what have you, design changes will happen. Anything that impacts one of these design documents that we've talked about previously, inputs, outputs, any of those, should be considered a design change. So you have to have a process established for how you will evaluate design changes, how you will determine risks associated with design changes, and how you will implement and track the implementation of design changes. Yeah, okay. So this is a little tricky because it is not specifically called out in the regulation or in ISO 13485, but it is alluded to and it is required. You have to have design risk management and a risk management file per ISO 14971. It's part of the design and development file. It analyzes the risks of the design, the risks of use. It is not quality risk management. People coming from pharma or pharma development, drug pharmaceuticals typically have something called quality risk management. This is on the spot risk management. We assess the risk based on this one thing, this one time for this one process. This is different than that. This is a design risk management file. It goes into the design and development file. It identifies every potential hazard that could come up based on use of this device. It analyzes all of the risks associated with use and reasonably foreseeable misuse of the device. This is typically done with like FEMAs, if you're familiar with a design FMEA or a use FMEA. The URRA is another risk assessment that you can use that goes straight into the human factors file that we talked about earlier as well. You have to evaluate and grade the severity of the harm. You have to control them. You have to identify mitigations for them. And then you have to verify the effectiveness of your controls and any residual risks that still remain. So this is typically a hazard assessment or a hazard analysis, maybe some FEMAs, definitely a summary report, and an entire SOP for how you do risk management. So it's just another step of design controls. So out of this process, you end up with a design and development file. That includes everything. These are all of your design records. Inputs, outputs, verification, validation, risk, human factors, all of it. The risk management file is a subset of these. It contains all your risk documents. And these risk documents will be connected to your inputs and outputs because you will trace risks to inputs and outputs as the controls. So it's all connected and circular. But you have a risk management file that's a subset. This includes all your risk docs and your summary report. And then you'll have a human factors file, which will also be a subset of the design and development file. There's a lot of overlap among these. I know it looks like you have three entirely different processes you have to follow, but it's not that bad. There's a lot of overlap. Many documents apply to more than one of these files. So it's best to just keep a huge design and development file index, and you can indicate this is also risk management file, this is also human factors file, what have you. So we have the entire product realization process here. Planning, requirements, which are your inputs, design and development, which is creation of all of your outputs. Notice that risk starts as soon as you begin planning or as soon as you're done planning, and it travels all the way through for the life of the product. This is because it gets updated regularly. It gets managed over the life of the product, even after commercialization. But the entire design and development file gets managed through the life of the product. We have design transfer here that usually happens somewhere in the verification and validation phase, your regulatory submission and commercialization with your post-market. Design reviews at key points, creation of the full design and development file. This is what I do with most of my day. So as you can probably tell, I can talk about this for hours, but I have already talked about it for multiple hours. I did a webinar not too long ago about design and development files. This is a link to it. So if you would like to learn more about creation of design controls and design and development files, this is a good place to go. All right. When we're talking about design controls and design and development files specific to combination products, this is just a few things that I have come across through my years of doing this that might be helpful to you. So first of all, the D&D file will require review and updates regularly. So you need to have at least one person on staff in-house that can maintain this once it's originally created. Keep that in mind. Process changes, sterility changes, CAPAs occur, complaints occur. All of these things could lead to minor design adjustments or updates to the design file. So updates happen. EDDOs is a special thing defined by the FDA. This is called essential drug delivery outputs. These are the requirements that you define in your design inputs that are specific to this combination of drug and device, and what they define it as essential for the proper functioning of the device to deliver the drug. Critical to function is another way to think of these. These are the items that you will verify at all time points. So you'll verify this at T0, straight off the end of the line or straight after sterilization. You'll verify them again after distribution, and you'll verify them again at the end of shelf life. For things like a prefilled syringe, well, actually, let's back it up. Think about this as the forces it takes to deliver this. So break, loose, and glide, button press forces, shield retraction forces, cap removal forces. Those are usually EDDOs. Any requirements that help you define an accurate dose getting delivered, fill volume, delivered volume, etc. And then think safety. So CCI, container closure integrity, sterility, purity, those would also be that the combination product that the drug or pharmaceutical is contained within helps to or participates in the maintenance of sterility, purity of the product, etc. So when you're testing your EDDOs for design verification, remember, outputs meet the inputs in design verification. You want to use a statistically significant sample size. This is not an N of 5. You always want to test a statistically significant sample size because design verification requires statistical significance. You want to use commercially representative products. Try not to use hand-built prototype type things. Try to use stuff that went through the fill line, has drug in it, not water-filled devices, things like that. Protocols have to be approved in advance and have to define acceptance criteria in advance, and the reports have to include all the raw data. So, like I said, this is what you would test at T0, T after distribution, and T at expiry. Definitely want to define these early in the development process. So you want these to be clearly identified within your design input requirements, because this is the majority of the design verification testing you'll have to do for a combination product. I want you to think about maybe adding shelf life samples or adding your shelf life tests for the device, which would be T equals expiry date, to your stability protocol. You're already putting massive amounts of products up on stability, either accelerated or real time for the drug, purity, contents, etc. If you put enough finished devices up there, you can also pull those for your shelf life samples. So definitely consider that since you're already doing that for the drug. And don't forget packaging and labeling. So when it comes to medical devices, packaging and labeling is considered part of the device design. You have to have inputs and outputs and your risk assessment and verification and validation for the packaging and labeling as well. This includes the package insert or prescribing information where you have your instructions. It also includes the on-product labeling. If there's printed cartons, if there's a sticker on the device itself, all of that requires design controls around it. Some more special considerations. Don't wait until you're ready for your phase 3 clinical to get started on your combination product development. It's too late. It will delay your clinicals. It takes time, and your device will need to be fully verified before being used in a clinical. Another thing to note, many pharmaceutical developers automatically assume that clinical trials are design validation. Typically, they are not. That typically you need a specific usability study for design validation, because clinical trials are highly controlled environments and not representative of real use. So sometimes it helps to think backwards. Think about the claims you want to put in your labeling. Think about the specific measurements, notes, numbers that go in the labeling, and those end up being your product requirements. Once you have your requirements clearly defined, you know exactly what testing you need to do, because every requirement requires testing. And then utilize a consensus standard. There's ISO standards for syringes and needles and lure locks and everything else. And if you can simply say must be compliant with 11040, must be compliant with 80369, then you can cut the corner on some of that stuff. Purchasing off-the-shelf components, syringes, plungers, needles, what have you, from a great vendor that has a lot of documentation behind it does not get you out of needing to do design controls. It helps you get design outputs, but you still need a full file because you're the one putting it together with the drug. And the off-the-shelf component suppliers are not going to take that responsibility on. So just something to keep in mind. A lot of people think, well, we're using this great BD syringe and they say it's certified to everything. I don't have to test it. That's not true. You have to test it once your drug is in it. And then it is the interactions of the components, the interactions of the syringe or the auto-injector or the barrel or the vial cap or what have you, with the needle, with the plunger, with the user, that you have to verify and validate. Brief topic here for software. If we are developing a combination product that has an app or dose tracking, or you scan a QR code and it logs something for you, or anything like that, we are now talking about connected devices. We are talking about a device that includes software development. So software, firmware, apps, things like that are all part of the design of the device. They require design controls. There is a specific standard, IEC 62304, that talks about how to document software development design controls. And it'll be an entire other aspect of your design and development file. So there are also security considerations when you have a connected device, anything that has to communicate with anything else, even if it is USB port to download something, or if it's connecting to your cell phone over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Those are all connected. They all have cybersecurity concerns. Cybersecurity is a whole thing in and of itself. There's a security management plan. You have to have an SBOM. You have to have threat modeling. You have to do penetration testing. This is a real hot button for the FDA right now. They are not letting anyone get away with anything when it comes to cybersecurity. So any type of connected device, there's an entire cybersecurity world that you're going to have to manage, document, and keep as part of your design and development file. The good news is I am not a cybersecurity expert, but we do have cybersecurity experts, and he has done a webinar for us This is available for you if you would like more information about cybersecurity documentation, and capturing the cybersecurity deliverables for submissions. Okay, implementation strategies. So when we're talking about the 6 sections of the QMS that you need to include already existing quality management system, if you've already got a robust QA group and they understand quality management systems, these SOPs can easily be internally developed, either incorporated into your existing processes and procedures or separately written. If you do not have a robust QA group or a QA group that is comfortable with the device regulations, you can always find outside consultants that can help. The good ones are going to assess the system you already have, help you find a way to best fit what is necessary for the device components into what you're already doing. They're going to right size it for your company. They're going to not, overblow it. I would recommend you avoid purchasing off the shelf SOPs, only because they're not going to make sense. They're not going to fit in with what you already have. Like I said, all the pieces of the QMS need to talk to each other. They all have feedback loops involved in them, and they connect. So if you buy something off the shelf, it's unlikely it's going to make sense with what you've already got in place, and it'll be really tough to follow. Once you've written the SOPs, you have to train all the necessary employees. If consultants help you develop your SOPs or help you incorporate these requirements into your existing SOPs, they can also provide the training. But you need to ensure that your employees understand their roles when it comes to things like purchasing controls, management review, installation and servicing, and the creation and maintenance of D&D files, because they connect to other procedures and other things that you're doing, complaints, post-market surveillance, things like that. And there's a bunch of records that need to be generated as evidence that you're complying with these SOPs. So it touches a lot of departments, it'll touch a lot of employees, and it's important that once we've implemented or drafted these new SOPs, that everybody knows what their role is when it comes to these new aspects of the quality management system. And then design controls. There are 2 phases to this. One is the procedures, which we just talked about, but then the initial drafting of all of your design controls, getting everything in place so that you have inputs, outputs, verification, validation, risk management, usability, all of it written down for the first time and signed off. And then there's the ongoing maintenance aspect of it. You can always staff an internal device development team or person, depending on your size and the level of your operations. And they will be the ones responsible for developing and maintaining the design and development files. You can outsource the development of a D&D file. A consultant can come in, help you create it initially, and then teach the people who will be responsible for maintaining it how to do that before they bounce out and leave. Or you can have external consultants come in to not only develop it, but also maintain it. The only trick with that is it's going to be up to internal people who are monitoring suppliers, people who are keeping track of changes, keeping track of manufacturing. It's going to be up to them to engage your external expert when the design file needs to be touched. So you just need to be cognizant of that and make sure that that's part of training and development of the design files. Okay, I hope that based on this last 50 minutes where I talked your ear off the whole time, you at least understand what it means to submit a combination product, how it's going to go, the 6 core elements you have to implement within within your already existing pharma or biologic QMS. I hope that you have at least a baseline appreciation for design controls and their complexity, because it is not the easiest thing to just understand. Cybersecurity, software development, it is critical for connected combination devices, and it is more and more and more the focus of the FDA. So I just hope I put that flag in your brain and you will be cognizant of that moving forward. Strategic implementation does matter. It counts, and it will matter greatly to the effectiveness of the procedures that you put in place. If they make sense for your operations, if they connect properly to all the other processes and procedures that everybody's already doing. The way that you implement these additional tag-ons really will affect how well you're able to execute this. And it should be tailored. It should be tailored to your organization. It should be tailored to your operations, your size, and the complexity of your device. So all of these things make a difference in how these processes are established, connected to everything else, and how your organization can move forward with them. So all that being said, I guess we should find out from Brandon if we have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, again for your insights. You've shared a ton of great information today. We did receive some questions, and if we don't get to your specific question, we'll be happy to address those after. So the first question here, what are some practical ways to integrate ISO 14971 risk management into an existing pharma QMS?
Oh, okay, so that's great. So quality risk management is assessing the risks based on this one specific thing, right? Based on this CAPA, based on this document, based on this one thing. For design risk management for 14971, what's important is you create your risk management file. It's all about the design of the product. And then instead of conducting a risk assessment fresh when you have a CAPA or a complaint or something you're documenting for some other process, you simply refer to the existing risk management file. You determine if it's already assessed in there as a risk, what the severity is, what the harm is, what controls you put in place, why this came up again in this quality management system thing that happened, and then you determine if it requires revision or additional information, or if you should maybe just update the severity or update the occurrence level or something like that. So rather than documenting an independent risk assessment on the spot as needed, you have the risk management file that you refer to, and you talk about what you did with the risk management file when it comes to the device constituent component. So you can use it instead of writing it fresh when it comes up. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very valuable. This next question here, what are the key differences between CAPA in device regulations and non-conformance handling in pharma?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is that root cause that I talked about earlier. Non-conformances are a symptom when it comes to device quality management systems. The non-conformance is a symptom of something going wrong, something bigger that could be fixed. Non-conformance is this one instance where something didn't perform exactly per specification or happen exactly the way we defined it was supposed to. Whereas CAPA assumes that this non-conformance happened because other things are faulty within the quality management system. So the investigation can't just be, oh, they forgot to label it that way this one time, and then we relabel everything, rework everything, non-conformance closed. No, when it's a CAPA, it's we didn't label everything right this one time, but we didn't do that because 3 people were out of the office and 2 people didn't know how to label it right, and why were 2 people who didn't know how to label it right doing that? Because it was an emergency and we were late on this, and you just keep investigating further and further and further and figure out where within the quality management system could we have prevented this from happening, or could we correct such that this would never happen again? And then 2 months later, 6 weeks later, whatever, you have to come back and do an effectiveness check once you've implemented that to ensure that whatever you discovered as the root cause, you have actually fixed it. And that all gets captured as part of a CAPA file and CAPA documentation. So it's, whereas a nonconformance is very isolated and a one-time thing, CAPA is expansive. It fully expects that you can analyze your entire QMS and determine where the actual failure was that would have prevented or corrected this from happening from the future. And then you verify it at the end after it's had time to take effect and be implemented. Way different than nonconformance, just because it's the same section of 1345. So it's a whole process.
Okay, and it looks like we're almost out of time here, so we got get one more question in. How should
Okay.
companies approach installation and servicing requirements if their product includes a digital or connected component?
So it's all about knowing in advance what the process is for installation or servicing, documenting that. So you have checklists, you have specifications, you have a process that says, this is how we know what we need to do, and then this is how we know we did it right. And so that's true for installation and servicing. If we have to go service something, or if something gets returned to us and it needs to be serviced, there needs to be a process established for how it gets investigated, how you determine what is wrong, how you make changes, and then how you verify that it performs to spec now. I think the easiest way, and this very much depends on the complexity of the device, the complexity of the product that's getting serviced, what have you. So it can vary widely, but simply establishing solid, all-encompassing checklists is a great way to start. Every time we have to go install, we have to do this, 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 and this. We have to use these tools, and then we have to test this, and this is the output. We have to test this, and this is the output. We have to test this, and this is the output. And that can be something that can be filled out every time it gets installed. It gets initialed and dated by the person who did it, and then you have your installation record or your service record or what have you. Because that can often be outsourced, because it can often be people not intimately aware of the development process and everything else that went on, solid, robust checklist is a great way to go. And then your process, your SOP for installation and servicing is all about, you follow the checklist, you fill out the checklist, you sign and date the checklist, you return the checklist so it can be saved as a record. And the same can be true for servicing. Again, though, if it's a much more complicated device or complicated product, obviously a checklist isn't going to be adequate, but it's a start. It gives you an idea how to establish that as current standard operating procedures.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Jessica, for going through all of that information on this presentation. Just a reminder, this will be available on demand after. You'll be getting a email post with a link, so you can go check it out on our website. And finally, again, I'd like to thank all of the viewers for attending this session. I hope you found it to be a valuable experience, and thanks again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.